All right, let's talk about finding area of a two-dimensional figure. Now, one type of problem that you might find is you might find a problem like this one where it's just cordoned off into little squares. And right down here, it's telling us that each square is 1 square meter. Now, another way of writing 1 square meter is like this. And that 2 we'll talk about in just a little bit. It's because it's got 2 dimensions. This has a width and it's got a length. So the formula, area has a formula, a way to get it. It's like a recipe, like your grandma might follow to bake a cake, or you could follow your grandma's recipe and bake a cake like grandma. So the formula is area is equal to the length times the width. Now, what that keeps us from doing is we could go through here and count every single square inside this thing. So I could go through and I could number every single square inside here. And eventually I would come up with the area. But what if the area was something like 798 squares? Well, that's going to take forever. So there's a shortcut. And what the shortcut is I would need to multiply the length times the width. So the length is this measurement up here. And I look at the lines, how many lines are in here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this would be 10 meters right there. Each one of those lines is a meter. And the width is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meters. So 5 meters. And so that's telling me if I do the area is equal to 10 times 5. So that is going to be 50 meters squared, or 50 square meters. And that's what my answer would be. So I could go through and label all 50 of those, or I could just multiply the length times the width. Of course, multiplying is going to be much faster. Now, let's look at a different example. You might get a problem that looks like this right here. Okay, so again, I could go through and label each square, could count up each square. But that formula that I showed you over here, length times width, only works with rectangles and squares. So this isn't a rectangular square shape. So a few things I could do. Number one, I could go through and count every single full square in here. And that's one thing I could do. But what I am actually going to do is I'm going to rope off this area right here because this is a rectangle. And so, of course, it's going to have a width and a length. So the length of this particular one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 6 centimeters, since each one of these is a square centimeter. And the width is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 centimeters. So I could do the area is equal to the length, which is 6, times the width, which is 5. So my area in this case is 30 square centimeters. Now then, so that leaves this little triangle out here. So what I could do, this would be easy enough. I could then count these off. So there's 10 of them. And then when I connect these two halves, that makes 11. Connecting these two halves makes 12. And this is another 1/2, which I'm going to write actually as 0.5, because 0.5 is 1/2. So I have my 30, my original 30, right there. And I'm adding to it 12.5. So So I could add it up just like this, and I get 42.5 square centimeters. So that'll work. That's one way I could do that one. I could have just counted all of them up and I would have gotten the same answer. But this goes a little faster. So notice each one I'm using this formula, area is equal to length times width. So now this one right here, there's no squares for me to count. So I'm going to have to use the formula. I'm going to have to use the area is equal to the length times the width. So now it doesn't matter which one you say is the length and which one you say is the width, okay? Because 24 times 17 is the same thing as 17 times 24. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep things consistent and say that this is the length and this is the width. So I've got area is equal to 17 times 24. So I have to multiply this out. So this is just a plain old multiplication problem. So I believe we are going to get this right here. So that is 408. So that means inside of this, the area, that's the space inside there, is 408 square millimeters. Okay, I could also write that same answer this way, 408 millimeters squared. Remember this 2 right here, I said we'd talk a little bit about that. That stands for 2 dimensions. This is a 2-dimensional figure, and those dimensions are the length and the width. 2 dimensions, that's where the 2 comes from. Okay, so the way that you find area of a rectangle is multiplying the length times the width. You can also use that for squares because, as we know, squares are rectangles. And then there are some shapes where you have to count a little bit of what's left over, like this shape right there. All right, so this should tell you how to find area.